good afternoon, or good morning, or good night, depending on whenever you're listening to this. But we appreciate you joining us today at the Letterman Legends podcast. I am, of course, your host, Chris Miles. We appreciate you joining us for week 2 of the podcast, season 1. We hope you guys had a great holiday break. Hopefully everybody returned back uninjured. If you celebrated the holiday, if not, we still welcome you back. As first things first, we always want to start with letting you guys know to go ahead and give us a follow on our social media pages. So we have a Instagram, Letterman Legends Podcast. Please follow us there. We're a growing podcast and we want to get the word out to the appropriate people. So please give us a follow there, as well as on YouTube, where we stream our live videos, like the one you're probably watching now. So go ahead and give us a follow on there. So that way you don't miss any of the episodes. We're also streaming on all platforming services. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music. Please give us a follow on there. And if you like what we're doing on the show, be sure to go ahead and give us a review. That'll go a long way with the podcast and kind of get us working within that crazy algorithm that we have to deal with. So we definitely appreciate you guys' hand there. But aside from that, we're just happy you guys joined us here for this week. Now, a little update about the previous week. Some things I wanted to touch on as far as just in the sports world. I'll be honest, I am amazed at the Boston Celtics and just how they got rid of Jaylen Brown for like a bag of pork skins. It's insane. And I'm not saying that because we look like we could be related. Like that's not exact. I'm not being biased there. I don't know why, but, I don't know if it's a marketing thing or, is just Jason Tatum maybe a little bit more likable on the team or by upper management, but I think it lends credence to the topic we actually touched on last week, where there is a political side to politics. There's a political side to sports, where no matter what, you look at this team, the Boston Celtics, and they were number 2 in the East, prior to Jason Tatum's return, with Jaylen Brown being the focal point of the offense and, leading the team. So the fact that, they kind of traded him away for a piece of bubble gum there it's alarming, but it kind of it touches on that point where if the management or the people in charge of the team, coaches, upper management doesn't want you there, they don't care what you're doing for the team, they'll risk the success of the team or the possible future to get rid of you. So and I guess that's any workplace, it's a political side to things. If you're not likable within the company, I'm not here to make that accusation on Jaylen Brown, but it's definitely strange, and I don't know of any Boston Celtic fan that's actually happy with this trade. It wasn't like he was, that this was a known thing that, his team didn't like him or the Celtics upper management. So definitely interesting to see it play, in the professional leagues, because they're always trying to give us that appearance that things are, in the pros, this just doesn't happen. That's little league things that you deal with, but once you get to the pros, it's all about winning, at least they try and make it seem as such, but, you kind of see that wasn't the case here. And, the Celtics Philly's looking good this year. So we will see how that plays out. But, it was definitely, an interesting trade. And that's no knock. When I say the pork skins or bubble gum, that's no knock at Paul George either. I want to get that clear. Well, yeah, whatever. If it is, it is, maybe it is a knock at him. This isn't 2013. So, still a pretty good player, but, for Jaylen Brown, who's in his peak right now is it's kind of crazy. But we'll touch on that later on as the season goes on. I'm sure it will come back to hunt Boston. You guys let me know in the comments what you think. But definitely been an interesting trade a trade period in the NBA. So moving on from that. Um, MLB has been interesting. White Sox are doing good. I'm happy. I have no complaints there. We're playing good ball, so hopefully we can keep it up there. Um, you know, sorry you Cubs fans, but this is our year to be that team. And Cubs have like one of the most loyal fan bases, as well. So, well, bandwagoners too, but, the Sox, I think this is our time. We deserve it. So, well, I'm not saying we're going to go to the World Series, probably not, but, um, you know, the chance is there. We're a good team, and they're playing good ball. They know how to win. So, we'll just see what happens there. And shout out to the young people who are making fitness and working out you know common play. It's trendy. You're seeing it everywhere. Everybody's trying to get back healthy, and it's beautiful to see. But you guys have also, in the same breath, you guys have made the gym very threatening for me, I would say. I used to go to the gym. I've been going to the gym for some time now. I'm not a young man, but back in the day, it was kind of gym etiquette. How there's pool and dinner etiquette. There's a gym etiquette. Now it's just a free for all. I like to mention, and yeah, uh, the gym is a little bit a little bit more uneasy now because that etiquette isn't known. So just a little bit of context there. So what am I even getting at? So there's so I go to the gym, and, I, Planet Fitness. So this isn't saying too much, but, I lift a little bit of weight, and a lot of times I'll come in and somebody's working on their set next to me, and they'll see me and they'll try and and keep up with my working set. So they'll see me put weight on, they'll try and add weight or try and do it until it gets to the point where they can't keep up. And dude, I'm not paying you any mind, dude. I'm just trying to get this workout done so I can get out of here. And I'm starting to see especially, well, typically with the guys, once that happens, now the workout is switched from I was bench pressing to now I'm I'm getting ready for UFC fight night, 314. Now they're shadow boxing and, jumping and doing, roadhouse kicks and, showing me their skill set. And it's like, dude, relax, man. I understand, dude. It's just these weights aren't going to save me from getting beat up, dude. You don't have to do all that. It's just a very threatening environment. Like, I go now and, I don't know when this became normal, but now when it farting in between sets become a thing. I was not aware that was, what we're doing in the gyms now. You would usually, there was an etiquette. You would hold it either to your left or, the person around next to you finishing their set moved. And now they're just far. I don't know how many times I've been like maxing out and got crop dusted and almost lost my life. So, yeah, it's a different time, very strange time at the gym, but, I am happy that they're gone. So I guess I either find another gym, old school gym, or, live with the Planet Fitness rules, which is none. There are no rules there. It's kind of just like, hey, do what you do, man. So I don't know why we're farting in between sets while we're texting. Anyway, there's not even like working sets. They're actually like just sitting there, and, you think it's safe to go change your weight out, and boom, crop dust. So, and then it's the protein ones. So they aren't pleasant to smell, but moving on. If we can work on that, this will be even better movement, but I am happy for those going to the gym. I do dread going today because of that, but, fingers crossed, we come out smelling the same way we came in. So, um, yeah, I think that's pretty much it for housekeeping right now. Today's episode is titled "There's No Place Like Kansas." Interesting. Last week's episode was about my middle school and high school life, and I'll be fair, if you guys see me looking over here, I'm trying to keep this stuff in order, but I want to start this by saying I apologize for last week because I gave you guys a story about my life and I didn't even check to see if you guys gave a crap. So, that's very rude of me and I apologize. So to make it up this week, I'm going to do an episode about my life. Just I think it connects a lot of points, but it's important you know who you're listening to before we get into anybody else. I think it'll make some of the questions I ask and things like that more helpful and kind of see why I got going in this direction and with podcasting and this particular podcast why the focus is what it is. So yeah, this episode once again is named "There's No Place Like Kansas," and it's kind of a spinoff of the No Wizard of Oz. There's no place like home, which took place in Kansas, but this was also my life coming out of high school. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this week's episode. No Place Like Kansas coming to you right now. Okay, so all right. So prior to college, let's just start it there. I was, as you can hear from the stories, you're like, how do you have enough time to do all this stuff? It was because I was a pretty straight laced, kid, I would say. For lack of a better term, I was pretty straight laced. I didn't smoke, didn't drink, didn't party. Most of that was not because of my own choices. It was mostly just the household I lived in. There was going to be none of that. We you're getting up and going to church Sundays. Saturdays are usually track meets, or some type of sporting event. And you're pretty regimented with your schedule. So you didn't have time to do, it wasn't no Friday nights for football games. Once those seasons ended, you kind of, and I just think the high school just that I lived in, I mean, and I probably will hear from people who went to high school with me would say there were a lot of parties. Yeah, I just wasn't invited, and that might be the case as well. But I just didn't know of too many parties going on, like that, or at least with people that I hung out with. So, that was never anything I felt that I was missing out on or kind of wanted to do because, I just wasn't exposed to that. So I always kind of save that up in my mind that when I got to college, that's when you party. It's kind of what I grew up on. It wasn't really, didn't really, see too many high school parties, besides in the movies. So that's kind of what I set my sights on. So just keep in mind that from 11, you know, 11 years old, 12 years old, you're starting to see these big college parties and, 13, now you're in high school, 14, and you're seeing like Project X and, all these crazy, movies that kind of glamorize the whole college partying scene. They're alive and well at that time. So I was just like, I just got to get to college. I just got to get to college, and from there we'll get everything we're looking for. So the goal was to definitely get to college, and won't by any means necessary. So fast forward, it's time to go to college. So I got a scholarship to Hutchinson, Kansas Community College. And I am, so prior to even going out there, I'm excited. So at this time, I looked at the population and there was about 5,500 people. So I was like, okay, cool. That's a lot of people, so I think there was 5,500 like on campus students. So I was like, okay, there got to be some parties or something happening out there. So I go to visit the university, not university, the college. I go to visit the college, and my dad takes me. It's a 12-hour drive to this school. They didn't have me flying out first class. It was a track scholarship, so track was non-revenue, but we'll touch on that later on, with some of the things we had to do to kind of like fundraise and make things happen. And I'm sure this is probably just you know with it being a community college or junior college, a lot of the things that the D1 athletes and D1 universities had for their athletes and well, student athletes at the time was a little bit different from ours. The funding, the things like that. So we go out there, we take the trip. It's 12 hours. We get out there and we got lost a few times. Um, this is probably what 2013 when I visited. So well, maybe early 2014. We rented a car. We take the trip out there to visit the school. Now, when we visited, it was probably, I want to say, maybe my spring break is when we took the trip. So the track team wasn't even there. So I couldn't even meet the team, the coach, any of that. They gave us a tour of the campus, showed me the two dorms and, kind of how it looked. And I'll be frank, getting out there, just a little insight about Hutchinson, Kansas in general, according to the 2014 census. Let me get this right. The population was 41,548, which is actually, higher than it was measured 3 years ago in 2023. So, pretty busy. Still small town, coming from, Chicago and Chicagoland area. But, it was, I wouldn't say it was desolate, very rural and country, you got all those vibes for sure going out there. So, first things first, my dad sees it and he's like, they're kind of uneasy because this is my first time leaving the house. I didn't do sleepovers. It was none of that. And they're like, you're going to be 12 hours away on your own, in this little, you know, small town, Kansas. It was a bit, I guess eye opening for them, kind of like, what the next year was going to hold. And for myself, but I was just ready to get out, I was ready to finally start living my life and, becoming my own man, aside from my parents. So we visited the school and I remember getting on the campus and it was pretty barren. And they might have been on spring break as well at the time, but we walked around. We went to the cafeteria. Now, I had visited my brother prior to this point at university, and I saw would have like multiple dining halls, so I really wanted to see like what that was about. I like to eat, so I needed to know what I was going to be eating for the next year. So we go to the dining hall, and I walk in, and I'm expecting to see this large layout of food, buffet style, things like that. One corner is maybe Greek and, pasta. And the other one is maybe burgers. And the other one is, whatever the case may be, how a lot of colleges or universities are laid out. Not at this school, and I was in for a rude awakening there. And I probably, should have known I was going to have myself a time once I went in the cafeteria and there was probably, it kind of looked like it's probably too old of a show, but, kind of like, I would say like the chum bucket for the newer people. So when, they opened the chum bucket on SpongeBob and, he was serving food and they had like, that's kind of how it was. It was probably like, it was one little section. It was probably about as wide as long as this hallway behind me. And they had like maybe like four different slots. So you probably had like your veggies, your carbs, so like potatoes, fries, your protein, and maybe like I don't even know what the last one, probably water or something, like very very just straightforward, nothing special. And they were so friendly. The lunch ladies, they saw me that I was on the tour, and they're like, you want us to whip you up something, sweetie? And I was like, absolutely not. I'm cool with this McDonald's. I'm gonna get on the way back. Like, I'm cool. It was just old. It was old. It almost felt like you're like walking back in time. Or like, just think of like one of the old style, like 1950s cafeterias, or kind of where they have the little ladies serving it behind, just scooping it out of the little section. I'm trying to paint the picture for you guys, but that's exactly what it was. Like, it was like, the older movies, or if you've seen House Party, how they were serving the lunches in the cafeteria. Great movie, by the way. Please watch it if you haven't seen it before. But yeah, that's kind of what I was coming into. So I was like, okay, whatever. So they show us the dorms, and those didn't really look too interesting, but I kind of took it what it was. I was kind of the situation I was in, so it wasn't much I could do. I just had to learn to kind of live with it. So moving forward, we do the visit, we come back home. My dad is not a fan of it. But I don't know any better, besides, going to my brother's school. The dorms didn't really, look too much different from university. So, I was kind of like, oh, whatever. When kids are back in town, it'll be different. So the time comes to go to college. The season's starting. So I believe I got out there maybe like a week or two before classes began, to kind of get situated. So we have family that stay in Kansas City, Missouri. So we drove as a family out there, stayed a few days with them, and then we made the trip, which was another 6 hours from Kansas City, Missouri to Hutchinson, Kansas. And we get there, and they're more so like athletes. They had me staying in Kent Hall, which I will make sure to put a picture of, exactly. This is how it looked when I was there, and it probably looks the same now. But we get there, and we had started like I want to say maybe like a group chat, if that was a thing at the time. I'm not sure. Maybe. Yeah, so we had like or maybe it was like an app that you could like talk to multiple people, but all of my roommates. So I was gonna have three other roommates, so four total in a room. I'm being from Chicago. All of my roommates were from the South. So prior to this, I had never, um, I'd never really met anybody from the South, or kind of divulged in just that upbringing and way of life, that they live differently than we do in the North. Their terminology and things like that. But I've become all too familiar with a lot of it as time progressed. But and I think this is, as you listen to the story, I don't want this to kind of get lost. Like, this is what college is for. You shouldn't go out there and hang with all people who follow what you're accustomed to. You're supposed to, that's life. You got to get out of your comfort zone, meet new people in different walks of life, and, ways of living. And that's kind of how you learn to adjust and adapt to what the world really is. And it makes you more well versed and, able to adapt in different environment situations, which also are helpful in a multitude of instances, but definitely in the workforce and, things like that. You're able to go into those worlds and you still be okay, so definitely never saw the point of, going to college and, just limiting yourself to only people from Chicago, you know what I'm saying? Or, anything along that line. So, yeah, so they're all from the South. So one's from Georgia, my boy Ben. Uh, then you had one from Winter Haven, Florida. Ren. And I remember when I saw his name, I was like, what is that? It was different. It was a different last naming, but turns out he was Haitian. Coolest guy ever. Coolest guy. Funny guy. And then we had one from Orlando, Florida. So just all over. But me being a northerner, I was like, okay, whatever. Well, we'll see how this goes. So we get there and they immediately they came help me unload, unpack, so that kind of put my parents at ease. But we knew it was going to be an adjustment for me. So my parents, they don't want to leave, but they do. And it probably was just that they didn't want to make the 12-hour drive. I'm not going to, put it all on me, but they eventually leave and it's go time. So that same day we had a meeting for the all athletic teams. We met at it's like a banquet hall they had on campus. And we finally got to meet our coaches, some of our teammates. We meet another guy from Florida, go figure. I think we called him SD. Hopefully that's your name, kid, and I'm not butchering it or misremembering. But yeah, I believe his name was SD. Super cool guy, super chill guy. Was always smiling. We're still friends on social medias to this day. But he, in this story, you'll see like he introduced me to the next level of college, being competitive and doing sports at the next level. It was going to be different, and the things you were doing in high school that you're getting away with and that you thought was elite, that there was a whole nother level to it. So he kind of introduced us to this, and you'll see very soon. So we're at the banquet hall. They call out the track team. Our coach speaks. He says, meet your teammates and we'll see you guys at practice on Monday. I believe I moved in on like a Friday. And so immediately I'm like, okay, well, what's going on in this lame ass town? Like what we got, does anybody know anything? Cause we had people with it being a junior college, you had a lot of people who were like Townsians. I don't even know if that's a word Townsians, but they were the people from the town, that they would just either commute to to the college or they would, stay on campus if they stayed over like maybe 30, 35 minutes away. A lot of times they would just stay on the campus to kind of get that experience and make it easier as far as transportation. So we go through the meeting, and then after the meeting, we met the guy SD, and he's like, I want to show you guys like the rest of the campus. So I'm like, okay, cool. So we got like, I think I had like, like some cross trainers on, I dressed athletically just cause I felt like we had to, cause it was a sports meeting. And he, takes us to like the library. We had to do like some pre-entry registration and stuff, and make sure like our medical stuff was up to date. We had to do it all like on the computer and upload it. So he shows us how he had already done his, and this kind of is the person he was. His stuff was already done. So he kind of walked us through it. We had to do like some tests, I believe, on the computer. It was weird. But so we did those. So now it's about 4 in the afternoon, I would say. And he's like, all right, what you guys about to do? We like, it's Friday, we just getting here. I think we lied. We're like, we're gonna take a nap. He's like, all right. He's like, well, I'm finna go for a jog if y'all wanna come. He's like, it's just a quick little jog. We like, all right, well, we're all competitors. So we like, well, you're not finna one up us, and tell us you about to do it. Absolutely not. So we we go, I think we got some water or whatever. And we like, all right, it's gonna be a quick jog, we don't have to hydrate too much. When I tell you this kid, first off, he had been out there. If we got there Friday, my roommate said we got there like that Thursday. He was there from like that previous Sunday, Monday. So he knew what he was doing to us. He knew what he was doing. So he's like, all right, I'm gonna lead the way. So we're following him. And he has us running through this town, you know, um, and those who lived out there, they know he had us run from the campus to the Walmart. Now I looked it up present day and I was dying. I did my little workouts around at the high school or whatever leading up to going to do track in college. Cause I'm like, I need to be in some shape, But so I'm not blindsided. But this kid, now just for context, the most I did was like the 400. So that's one time around the track. Mostly 400 and so 200 anchor the 4x1 in high jump. So I'm not no distance runner. I looked it up. This Walmart was 2.4 miles away that he had us run to. We ran there. We stopped for like 5-10 minutes, to catch our breath. We don't have any water. We didn't bring our wallets, like we took I think we took like a chug or maybe drank like half a bottle before we left because we were supposed to be a quick run. This is not a quick run, dude. What are we talking about? So this dude took us to Walmart. So now we're there. We got to get back. We ain't got no cars. Ain't got nobody. We can't phone a friend. We're up the creek right now. So we had to run back. So now it's getting darker. So we like, okay, you don't want to be in this small town out on these roads, running on these roads at night, that you're not familiar with and ain't familiar with you being out either. So you want to kind of protect your back. So we do that. We go ahead. We survive somehow. And I'm exhausted. I get in there and I'm like, dude, that was a quick run. And he's just laughing, he knew he set us up. But it showed that these kids you're gonna be running against, they're not gonna be playing around, it's different levels. So that kind of set the stage for how we were gonna train and get prepared for the season. So with that in mind and knowing that, I made sure to avoid this guy at all times. Like y'all thought I was gonna be like, all right, we got to do this. No, absolutely not. Not until the season started. I have made sure to avoid this guy, and I think my roommates did too. So, um, yeah, that was kind of that until the year started. I think we did. We would go to the track, and I think we had access to the weight rooms, but no, we wasn't for me. I wasn't for me doing that. That dude was, eh. Mm-mm. So, moving on, we have a meeting on a Sunday, just the track team. So the coach takes us to the locker room where we would kind of meet all before practice, kind of go through the workout for the day, what is expected, what groups we would break down into. And I see the high jumper. Now I had met him. There's another high jumper that was coming over, and he actually was a hometown kid. So I had saw him briefly, in the original, just a full sports meeting, but I had never like talked to him. And I figured I probably wouldn't eat too much anyway because at that point we were, rivals. I'm like, dude, like you're not better than me, so I didn't want to, even meet this guy or get familiar with him, but they kind of had us introduce ourselves, and after putting us in the groups we had to meet him. So I met him and I didn't really, nothing really stood out to me like of that we would ever be any more than like just okay, we're teammates. But that was pretty much it. But I think he probably didn't read. He probably read me like the same way. I'm a foreigner at this point. He's coming from this small town. And he sees me. I'm telling the coach, "Oh yeah, I can do this, and that, and I'm gonna be the next high jumper." So it's just two competitors. You realize, you think it's beef, but it's not. Just two men. Trying to you basically keep your scholarship. I think that's what you can kind of break down college sports to. Just that ongoing stress that, if I don't perform, there's somebody else waiting to take your position. So, it definitely keeps you humble in a lot of, specs. So I meet the kid, we go on, start practicing and, so just kind of give you a bit of the split what we're doing. So we would wake up, go to class, um, come back. I would try and take like a nap before, because my classes started early there during college, and the campus pretty much shut down after, I would say 7. So we would wake up, go to class, then we would um come back, go get lunch or whatever, grab a slice of pizza, because they would do like, and it was just like Papa John's or something in the basement. So they would like give them pizzas or whatever daily, and you can get like a sausage slice or whatever. Anyway, then I would go walk back and then take a nap until it was time for practice around like 2, 3 o'clock. And then you would go to practice. Then you would get out of practice. So 3 to maybe 5:30. Then after that, you had mandatory weight room every day. And then, so that would be like 5:30 to 5 to maybe 6:30, and you could either get ice or you have about 30 minutes to eat dinner because the cafeteria closes at 7. They could only make that slop for so long, I guess. So you would go, and a lot of times it was just like um there wouldn't be anything like, and I'm not even like exaggerating. This is people who went through this time with me know there would be times where it just like was nothing edible. So just imagine you just got through 2 practices, went through your school day. You maybe had a slice of pizza at noon. You went through 2 workouts, some of the workouts, including you running the neighborhood again. So you're doing like 5 miles, and everything closes. So there's like, in university, there's C stores, concession stores, student stores where you can kind of go up until maybe 11 p.m. at night and get snacks, chips, drinks. None of that. So when the cafeteria closes, you're done. Hopefully you have a car to go, maybe drive somewhere and get some food, but there's not, many options to begin with. So Um, so yeah, a lot of times you would get there and there was nothing edible. You would have to eat like 3 plates of fries, or sometimes they had a cereal section, so you would be eating cereal for dinner. And the cereals, it's instead of Cheerios is honey holes or something like it. It's just it was it was just oh man, it was just they're doing the best they could. But definitely a heck of an experience. So it's almost, I like kind of want you guys to like imagine, close your eyes right now. All right. If you're listening, close your eyes. Now I want you to imagine it's university time. You just got out of high school. You're going to your university of choice, first day out there, or let's say it's and if you didn't go to university, think of your first time when you first turned 21, you're able to go to the bars and drink and get in and, do everything you kind of wanted to. Like, think about that. Okay. So, and the people who went to university, think of your first night at university. Your parents just left. You got your outfits picked out. You got your friends, your buddies. Um, like you guys are there and somebody has a fake and somebody's able to buy like liquor or whatever, and you guys are ready to go out. You already heard about the rumblings that it's a party that night. Just close your eyes, think about that. Now remove all of that because that was not the experience I had. I had the opposite. So just take all that and kind of like flip it on its head. That was what that time out there was. Um, so so yeah, there was I didn't get the college experience at all. I would like go home and study after, as you should, but it's freshman year. Everybody knows those courses are pretty easy. I would like I had nothing to do but to study. There was no parties going on. And if they were, we didn't hear about them. And they were like in the basement of somebody like 50 years old on meth, inviting the college kids over. Sorry if you're listening and you're from Hutchinson, Kansas, but you know what happens in Hutchinson, Kansas. There was a lot of people who probably shouldn't have been around that college that were in that college. We actually had a guy, it was funny, who there's an older older man that stayed on our floor, and he would like walk around in his like tidy whities around the floor, and he had like this little old fashioned like black like leather handbag. You know how they like, I guess probably like the shaving utensils or some sort in his bag with like maybe his toothbrush, and it was just creepy. He'd walk around, he'd always wait till late, so if you had to go to the bathroom, at night, or, you got back in and you needed to shower. And a lot of times we did get back in late, just from practicing and, working. And he would just be, roaming the halls. He never said anything, but he, I would say he minded his business. So that was good enough for us. But, yeah, just over time, you just kind of found your way, adapted to the situation. And it was new for a lot of people. Even my guys from the South, they were, kind of a big culture shock because, Florida's definitely fast paced, the Georgia guy, he was from, country Georgia. So he kind of was able to adapt and kind of show us, the ways of the land. But, um, you just meet, it was just a big melting pot. So we dormed with the football players. Almost all of them were from the South. And we had it was funny because, you would have like, one room would be like kids from Georgia. So they're in there talking and they have their different slang and, accents. And, they one room you'd be in there and they'd be like, and they look out there and say, hey, like, hey, how y'all boy doing? Y'all boy good? I'm gonna get up with y'all boy. Y'all be cool. All right. And then in the next room, you got the New York guys and they in there and they like, hey, yo, we got 2 for 5s going on here, man. Word to mother. You know, straight up, word up, let us know. All right, 2 for 5s going in, 2 for 5, word up. And then you have the East New York guys in the other room, they like, hey, yo, dead ass son, hey, yo, son, check it out, son, come here. Just for a second, son. I just want to talk to you, son. You tripping, son, dead ass. We'll see. And, so you just kind of came familiar with, you know, you kind of were able to distinguish where they were from, so you had the Harlem guys. Those were the word up guys. Those were the guys who, were down there for, different sports. A lot of them were like basketball players. So they would hang out and they had a way that they dress, it was Tim's year round. And then you had like the East, I would say, New York guys who were also like, but they hung out together too, and they'd tell you about the boroughs and all the different things like that. And so it was, you learned that there is more to your world than what you grew up in and were raised in your environment. And, it was cool to, see that because they would come to me and say I have an accent, but they definitely had an accent, they sounded like it was you know, the Wu-Tang Clan. It was definitely interesting to see, but moving forward. So we're practicing and, I finally get to the point where I want to talk to this high jumper kid. So I do. And, I find out that he works at the local McDonald's. Now, prior to that, like I said, I'm eating scraps. If it's not cereal, a lot of times I would get up and go to the breakfasts just to like basically cop me a bag of like oatmeal or something that I could eat for later, or oranges, things like that. Anybody knows, like that gets old quick as well. But, just to have something to put in my body. So we're kind of like me and my roommate, Ben, we would get up and breakfast started at like 6. It'll probably be 6 to 8, maybe 7:45. And we would get up, and this is on a night of we're exhausted from practice. We would have to get up, and then we got to go home and do homework once we get out of all of this. So, I meet him and he works at the local McDonald's. He's a manager. And he's like, hey, we're hiring. He let us know that they're hiring at the job. So I'm like, hey, I'm out here. I don't get too much money. The food sucks, so I kind of saw an opportunity to, get me some different food and I have to pay for it. So he's like, yeah, come in for an interview. So I did it. I, I went and interviewed for it. I like studied for it. Like it was, it was a real job, but I knew all the McDonald's history. I was able to, me being from Illinois, it started in Oak Brook. was able to kind of like, yeah, I know it from there and this and that. And I had always worked, so it probably felt weird not working, even though I was an athlete at the time. So a lot of times he would go to practice and he'd have to leave the weight room because he had to go in and close the store until the morning crew would come in. So I ended up getting the job, and I always make jokes. I say, like, if somebody's wearing jeans at McDonald's, the workers, I'm like, oh, those are the Mick jeans. You either have to wear Dickies, or if you paid a little bit more, they would give you like jeans, and they would have like a M, the McDonald's M on it. So I'd always call them like the Mick jeans. So it's just a funny joke. But I start working there, and so now my split is I would get up, go to class, maybe breakfast. So I'm waking up at like 5, go to breakfast, come back, get change for class, go to class, come back, get a slice or something, take a nap, get up for practice, go to the weight room, run to the dining hall, try and eat. If it wasn't cat food in there, then I would go back to the dorms, shower, change, and then I would go to McDonald's and I would work there at like maybe a 10, 10, 11. So maybe do like a 7 or 11. But to be young, right? So yeah, it was crazy. I don't know why I was working myself like that, but I needed the money and I needed the food more importantly. So working there, at the end of the nights, they were really laid back and helpful. They knowing that I was a college student, they never really like pushed the issue. They would let me I think I started off working there and I was getting paid $7.25 an hour. And even for that time, I was like, that's kind of low. But the prices weren't what they were today, and they would give us like lunch on them. So they would give us like maybe $10 worth of lunch. And back then you could put a hurting, and we were McDonald's eaters. So I knew how much I could eat, for $10 there. So I was making it, or you had somebody on the grill that you knew could make that could cook and wouldn't, cheat you or give you the old food, so it was nice. You started making friends, you started learning more and more about the town. So it wasn't too bad, to start with, but it eventually did catch up. So yeah, just been out there. It was just like a lot of the times you're just kind of just playing it by ear, with a lot of things. So getting out there, there's no barber, so that you are at least aware of. So that was big. Where I come from, we had barbers all over. Not every barber you could trust, but you had the options. You can kind of find your barber and go from there, and then you with them for life, pretty much, till you move or whatever the case may be. So I'm out there, and I'm like, what are you guys? And most of the people, black people out there, they were coming from Wichita, Kansas. So you pretty much, if you didn't have a car, you weren't getting out there. That was probably like a hour and a half drive, I believe. Don't quote me. Maybe 45 minutes actually. But that was like their Chicago. So a lot of them were coming from there and they would just stay on campus, so they too weren't familiar. But I asked one of the guys from Wichita, like, where do you get your haircut at? And he's like, oh, I go to Big Mo. I'm like, okay, maybe, okay, Big Mo. And he's like, yeah, Big Mo. Like, I'm supposed to know who this is. So I was like, okay, where is this Big Mo? And he's like, oh, he stays in the town. I'm like, oh, so this isn't like a student. I got to go to someone's house. This isn't a barber shop that you're telling me location. I got to go to someone's house to get my haircut. So I was like, all right, well, and at this point, my hair had grew out and my hair had never gotten this long. So, I mean, it worked out, my parents would always give me the low all even, so the cut that they could do, in the bathroom, that's what I had. So my hair had never gotten as long. So I was like, all right, well, it's already grown out crazily. Like, I was like, next time you go, just let me know. It's no rush at this point. So, and my dad had like gave me some clippers, to kind of like line myself up, but it wasn't, I couldn't cut my hair. So he tells me when he goes to Big Mo. Now we go to this house off campus. Looks like a drug house. I ain't gonna lie to you. We go in there. And I'm like, wait, if the cut's fire, man, hey, it is what it is. And I see like football players, like people faces that I was familiar with, leaving his place. I'm like, okay, it may not be too bad. And we walk in, and I'm expecting like, okay, it's gonna be in the living room or whatever the case may be. And he's like, all right, y'all gotta go downstairs. And it's like people living. So it's like people like living in the like living room. So we gotta go past these people. It's just like a sketchy, very sketchy situation, So people looking at you, looking weird and, looking at you like you crazy, which is fair. I probably did look crazy. I needed a haircut. But they're checking you out, like, looking at you. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna get robbed. Like this is how it's gonna go, man. This how my time. I done survived all this in Kansas, and this how it's gonna go. I'm getting a haircut, and it's gonna be it. And to add to that, he didn't. I guess he felt like that wasn't enough. That I already felt that way. He takes us like down these stairs. Now I'm always trying to like paint a picture for you guys. This basement where he cut our hair looked like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre basement from the early 2000s one. Where you had the bodies like hanging up and, all that. That's how it looked. Like dim, the old wooden stairs. And he was cutting underneath the wooden stairs. So I'm like, all right, well, I'm here. At least I'm not here by myself. I made sure to go with somebody. So the dude, he gets his hair cut or whatever, and he like tries to get up and go. I'm like, hey man, chill. I don't know how to get back. I came up with something. I'm like, I don't know how to get back, man. Just hang out for me. Like, all right, I got you, Brody. I got you. So I get my hair cut. He jacks my hair up. But that was just one of those times, I think, in colleges where you're just young and you just kind of like feeling your way out, and you're trying to be independent and do your own thing, and it was just one of them things that could have went left, because the house ended up being like, I think, I just remember like people were still going to him and they couldn't go to him no more. So I'm not sure what happened to Big Mo. Maybe it was just that he was just getting money, untaxed money or whatever the case may be, but something ended up happening. So it was just, like I said, it was one of those situations where you just, it sounds like a good idea. And I probably handled that the best way I could, by bringing somebody with me. At the time I wasn't green, but I, we were definitely outnumbered in the house. And if he knew those people that were in there, then it could have definitely, been a, different situation. But, Kansas, it's no place like it. So I'm working at the McDonald's, and so at this point, me and my roommates, we're close now, It'd be like the Three Musketeers, Our other roommate kind of drifted away from us. He was, doing his own thing. He didn't really like us. That was our guy, but we all kind of minted that. Later on, as we grew up, it was just kind of like, or got older, I should say. It was just kind of like we didn't, not everybody, you're not gonna get along with everybody. For us to get 3 out of 4 roommates that got along, that's pretty good, in college anyway. So we're close. We're real close. So we would always share, whatever we had. So I think what started, so like I said, I started off with a guy. I didn't really want to know the guy, the manager that was the high jumper. My friend Ren, my roommate, he worked there first. And then I was like, I might as well, so I started working there. And we would like bring food back to our roommate, Ben, who stayed there. And, it was just like, and then when he got his little check, his refund from the college, I remember he was taking care of everybody. It was a spot called Bogies, out there. And that was like the first time I ever like experienced being the only black person in a situation. So prior to this, my middle school's black, elementary school black, I would say 95%, black, and then we have like maybe like 3, 4% Hispanic and, um, what, point 0.8, point 0.5 ambiguous, the rest of them, so yeah, just like middle school black, high school black, church black, back of my neck black, gums, you get it. All right, everything was black. So, I had never been in a situation like that. And I had been to like the Wisconsin Dells or, um, you know, I, I would be around people of different, races, but, you never, cause I guess maybe cause I was with my family, but it was just a day that was just a doozy out there. And I don't want this to be indicative of all of Hutchinson. Hutchinson was a very unique, but small community, so they pretty much know everybody. So, I don't know why this would have even been a thing because there's, athletes of all different races that stay out there, all year round, your football team that you're rooting for, the Blue Dragons, which shout out, we won the, National Junior College Championship that year. Thanks to, my boy Alvin Kamara, real super chill, cool dude. So, um, maybe we can get him on the show, soon or one day. But yeah, so I don't know why this was a thing, but I think that day was just a doozy. So us being track and field, just let me paint the full picture for you guys. We would have to do a lot of like odd jobs, different things, to make money, to get uniforms or be able to, I think our coach was buying our breakfasts he's spending that money out of pocket. With track being like a non-revenue sport, especially for junior colleges, that was just, you could just walk into our meets. It wasn't an entry fee like it was for, um, football or basketball games, things like that. We kind of made our money by fundraising. So they would have us, sometimes we would work concession stands. So we also hosted the junior college basketball tournament. We hosted it there. So we would have to work concession stand for that for the weekend. So you had to like pick hours, work that. It was non-paid for us, but I'm assuming whatever percentage of the money that the college made from that, they would give some to our team. We'd also have to like work concessions at the football games, all the sports that made money, just so we had, basically the scraps or whatever they felt like giving us to the program. So, um, with that came, like I mentioned, like a whole lot of odd jobs. So we were to work the Hutchinson, which is I guess the host of the Kansas State Fair. The fairgrounds are out there. So we had to work the parking. So we had to park people. And so we're out there in the grass and we're like telling people like park, getting them situated, keeping order so that you could they get into the fair and, do their thing. So we're doing that. And I'm parking somebody. I tell them their spot. And the guy's like, he gets out of his car and he's like, what did he say? I think he said like, can you spit shine it too? My car? And I just like laughed it off. I didn't really think anything of it, just like parking his car, so I'm already like, I'm doing this. So it was kind of like, I didn't take it as like anything. He didn't single me out. Like I was parking his car. It was just like, is this basically like, can you shine my car? But, they're like, I remember this young lady who was over there. She's like, what did he say to you? I told her and she was like, you like, oh no, like that's unacceptable. And like I was like, I didn't really see it that way. I didn't think it was too big of a deal. And she's like, no, no, that's unacceptable. She's like, I'm gonna take this area. Like, you go ahead and like I'll let you give you a second to like clear your head. I'm like, I don't, I hadn't been like exposed to, that type of situation or anything. So maybe that was just a newness in my brain. But I think to this day, I don't really, I think because I was the only one that was there, I don't think he meant it in the way that, it was kind of perceived, but they're like, yes, they moved me around and I ended up getting back to the coach somehow. And he's like, you can go ahead and take the day. And, if anybody was racist, it was probably, no, if anybody was racist, it might have been him, but, so I was like, I'm probably more worried about that than anything. But he's like, you can go ahead, you guys been working. You brothers did a good job today. You can go ahead and take a day. So me, my roommate, I get my roommate, we're going to go back to the room. It's so three of us and we have to walk because everybody's still working. They could give us a ride, but we're used to walking all around town anyway. So we're walking and we are like, let's get something to eat. We've been working all day. We haven't eaten anything. So we go to this spot called Bogey's. Very good food. Very good food. I hope they haven't changed anything. Very good shakes. I would go out there just for this, but we go in there and we had never been there, but it was on the way to the campus. So we get there and I walk in first. Now it's the Kansas State Fair. So not everybody that's in the restaurant is necessarily from Hutchinson, Kansas. So once again, I don't want this to be indicative of the people of Hutchinson. I walk in and it literally, for the first time in my life, that was the first time I was the only black person in a room. So I walk in and I'm trying to find the register because I hadn't been in there. And everybody stops. They're eating. It's almost like a movie. I'm sad to say, almost like a movie. So let's just say they're eating their burgers, and they, naturally going to look at who walks in. But when I tell you everybody stopped eating and just stared at me like, what the fuck are you doing here? Like, get the fuck out. Like, it felt like I walked like back into time, and I was just in like a whites only spot where they didn't want me to necessarily be. So, you know, it was eye opening, but it kind of since that point and finally going to university after this time and studying where I studied in certain classes, that's what I was the only black person in the class. And you just got to learn to be comfortable. And once my guys got in there, it wasn't, we didn't get bothered. I don't have any story about that from that particular instance, of us getting bothered or mess with. It was just like kind of like, what the hell are you doing here? And you just kind of, if you're that sensitive, walking around the world, as a black man, you're going to be bothered by a lot. You kind of got to learn to shake things off, unfortunately. And, so we got our food. I don't believe, as far as I don't know, it wasn't spit in. So, um, keeping spitting at the top of mind, though, let's kind of take a jump over to McDonald's. So I'm working there. And no, I did not watch anybody spit on anybody's food. But we did have a guy who worked late nights with me. And this guy he was a drug head. But he worked, he had to make that money somehow. So he worked. And, shouts out to him. But we're online together. And a lot of times people would go, and I think this is kind of what stopped me on McDonald's for a while. So won't be any McDonald's sponsorships coming here, I don't think, but it's okay. So a lot of times people will order in the drive-thru and then, somebody in the back will be like, hey, make that with only ketchup only. Or so when you order at McDonald's, people who work there know it comes up on a screen immediately. So if you're like, I want a double cheeseburger, and they'll put it shit through. We're starting the order. So we're dropping the buns. And let's say you say a double cheeseburger, then I want a quarter pounder and a McFlurry. And okay, for that double cheeseburger, I just want that cheese only, or I just want that ketchup only. Well, at that time, we're on a timer, so we're pumping that stuff out. We're trying to get it done. So if we put like mustard, onion on your burger and you only want ketchup, then, a lot of times you got to throw the bun away and start over, and it sucks. But, I would say 95% of the people aren't going to, they're just going to remake the burger. Well, this guy, this one night, he's on the buns. So he does the buns, he puts it through the slot, and then he puts the ketchup mustard on it, and he pushes it down to me, and then I'll put the patties, cheese, wrap it, send it down the belt. He's doing the burger, and then they switch it, and they're like, I just want just ketchup only. So I'm waiting. He has the bottom bun on the paper, and he has the top bun, which has the condiments on it. And he takes the bun. He sees it change on the screen. I remember it like it was yesterday. He takes the bun, and we had like a drawer where we would like clean the counter and like all the leftover residue and things like that. And hopefully I don't get sued for this, but it's a true story. I'm just telling a true story. um into the drawer, and he took his bun and he scraped it on the drawer, like emptying the ingredients and condiments off into the drawer, and he puts it back down. And you must have saw my face. I was like, I looked at him in disbelief, like, what are we doing? And he's like, verbatim, hell, I ain't eating it, and pushes it down the thing. And I was like, all right. And I'm just as complicit in that, and I apologize to whoever consumed that burger. I hope everything is going well. I hope you're okay. And there was no anything that came from that. But I was like, dude, if somebody has that mentality to making my burger, hell no. I don't want McDonald's. So I didn't eat it for a while. Then you get old enough, and you know, it just starts making sense again once you look at your bank account. So, needless to say, we, I made a burger just that way and gave it to my roommate, Ben. I'm just joking. But so yeah, I worked there, and, I officially it was getting to the point where I didn't have a car. Me and my roommates didn't have cars, so we like walked back home, and we had an instance where it was like police were just like purposely like they had like the lights on the side rear view mirrors and things like that. They had like a flashlight on it, and the streets were like, once it was nighttime, it was over. It was like, no, not street lights. Like we would have to use our flashlights. And we were walking home, and there was like a lot of times there wasn't even sidewalk. You were just walking like grass, but you're walking in front of someone's house, but it was just grass. There was no concrete down. So we were walking, and they were just like, we sitting on the side of the roads, and they would just like, blind us pretty much, like walking back home. So I had instances of this. I had instances of, I was going to class one time, and I was rushing. I was running a little bit behind, and I was trying to get into the class, and the teacher wasn't in the class, which I later found out. But the students, they like closed and locked the door, like locked me out of the door, and and then I'm like at the door, like, dude, like let me in. And they're just like sitting there, like looking straight, like acting like I'm not out there. And I'm like knocking on them. Eventually, the teacher finally came and let us in. And, oh, I was hot, man. So I went to I'm not going to see that image of me. But yeah, I was hot, and the dude acted like he didn't know. Dude, I didn't hear you, dude. I swear I would have let you in. I was like, the whole class didn't hear me. It was just soundproof doors. Like once it closes, like you guys anyway, little things like that. But overall, Hutchinson, he taught me a lot of lessons. I was probably in the best shape of my life because I had to walk everywhere, and, I was just ripping and running. I don't even know how I did it, but, I did have my first drink of alcohol out there. Shout out to college. It was, Keystone Light. So very special moment. I basically just drank pee. But it was definitely, I kind of just, came into myself out there. I, for the first time, changed my haircut. My parents have been cutting my hair one way for the longest. I got out there, changed it up, let it get long. Um, I got my ears pierced while I was out there. Like I said, first sip of alcohol. I, um, you know, was finally in charge of like what I wanted to do, things like that. I met a lot of good people out there, good hearted people. Um, you know, I always say Hutchinson, Kansas is the only spot that you could, within the same block, get racially profiled and then somebody offer you a plate, invite you in for dinner, within the same block. And, I think that's what life's about. You got to have that balance. Can't have too much of either. You kind of want to have that balance. Cause in Chicago, I always get called, hey, you look like Jalen Brown, but nobody ever offers me a plate. So I take offense to that. So you got to have that balance for sure. But yeah, ultimately I ended up leaving the McDonald's. As far as track and field, the practices, and this should be about sports, but I kind of made this. It kind of got a little personal, but I just wanted these stories to be told because, somebody out there has experienced similar, especially people who are out there. They know for sure. But, college was a different level. The athletes were great. I got to go against a lot of people who, went on to play, to run in the Olympics, jump in the Olympics. I remember a lot of times in high school, I wouldn't start to like 6 feet in the high jump, and a lot of people were coming. They were going out at like 5'10", 5'11". So if I did the 6 feet, I would win a lot of meets. And that was now me in college. And there was nothing. That was just it. That was the max. You kind of learned in college to get the most out of what you had. That was kind of the thing. If you had it, the coaches were there to, squeeze it out of, make the most out of your skill set. But a lot of times, you realize that it's different leagues to this thing, and, not to be discouraged, but to keep pushing yourself. And, you find other avenues where you can continue that growth. But, that wasn't the case for me. So I mentioned like, I was now on the opposite end of that. So I would be going out at like 6'6", 6'8", and there was a guy jumping 7'4" who wouldn't start meets to like 6'10", 6'8", just resting his legs. And that's where all of our jumpers were pretty much going out at maxing out at 6'9" and things like that. But you just realize, it's just like, you're the best in your town, but there's always a bigger, badder dog out there, and you kind of figure out, okay, you learn to accept it. You learn like, okay, this isn't high school anymore. So, yeah, I just, and it didn't sadden me. But once I saw high jump was going, I was like, okay, let me go to 400, kind of test my luck there. And I put everything into that, so I started with the 2.4 mile runs because he somehow convinced our running coach, that that's what we should be doing in practices. And sure enough, we did. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do the 400. So I'm just running one time around the track, but my workouts are, 3.5, 4 miles. We're running to the fairgrounds where we work, coming back to the campus, and finishing up on the track with like an 800. And I'm just doing the 400, but what it did, it got me in such great shape. But mentally, I was like, okay, I'm ready. I was ready to run and, kind of pivot from high jump to the open four. I felt like I could still get faster, and I always felt like if I could just keep my endurance up and sprint the entire 400, it could make some noise, So we get to the meet after all of this preparation, and I only had, I at this point, I had fell out of the lineup with the high jump. It's just it was bad, so I wanted to make an impact somewhere because I felt like I had to keep my scholarship. So needless to say, they're like, we're going to put you in the 4x4. So like, okay, it won't be my leg that messes up, like this isn't going to, for some reason I just felt like they could revoke my scholarship anytime out there. And I didn't need that. So, I'm the whole 4x4, people who know track, that's not until the very end of the day. So I'm warming up, trying to stay warm. And I stretching, working on handles, drinking water, and the 4x4 comes around and I'm second leg. So they open up the race. I'm amped. I'm ready to go. I'm going to sprint this whole thing. I get out and, well, they get out and I get the baton. And I ran a few. I had been winning. I had won earlier in the year, but I was kind of like focusing on high jump. So I figured, okay, if I'm just focusing on this, sky's the limit. I get the baton and I'm running and I get around the 100-meter mark and pop, it sounded like a gunshot. It was my quad. Yep. My quad ended up, that was it, like tearing pretty much. And I was like, oh my God. So I felt like Ricky in Boys in the Hood. Like I was just like, and then you see everybody just come, whoop, whoop. And I'm like, well, I got two other guys waiting that's been practicing and training for this day to run too. So I literally on a torn quad finished the race. And my coach was like, he's pissed, but he's like, come on, Miles. So I'm like, oh my God. So I run this 400. I ran the remaining 300 on one leg, torn quad, probably tearing it up some more. And then I give the baton to the guy and we're in last place. Like it should have been done. I should have just got off the track, but I was like, I was determined to finish it. I wasn't going to just stop mid race because what did we learn last week? You just don't quit. So I think we actually ended up taking the last two legs did their things. I think we were like third to last, but that's better than finishing last. So, I go down immediately. I knew it was over. And that was the season. That was it. So, I kind of knew like I didn't want to, do another year there. So I was really focusing on academics so I could transfer somewhere else. And, if I wanted to continue on with the track, I would do that. But, I did end up getting my grades and everything together that I was able to transfer over to, Western Illinois and, take a back seat and just go strictly academics and, whatever intramurals I chose to do. But, without Kansas and that experience, there wouldn't have been that opportunity wouldn't have been available to me. And, even just me going to college period. So, just learn. And I came in there and I felt like so mature over the people I was around with, because they had came to college and it was just laissez-faire and it was completely different for me. It was a survival. I'm working harder than I probably have in my life, up until that point. So it wasn't, so a lot of times I didn't do a lot of things that, your typical university student would have done. I was a lot more regimented and disciplined. And I think sports does that a lot to you, but it was almost like I was living a whole another world out there in Kansas. And it is, absolutely, no place like Kansas, and emphasis Hutchinson, Kansas for sure. So if you're ever around the area, please give it a check out. Go check out Bogies. Sports are great. They get some of the best athletes, from D1 schools, and maybe something that had a hiccup that no longer can go to the D1 or maybe have to go back and, kind of get their academics up, whatever the case may be. But, universities definitely had their pick of the litter for our athletes there, so, yeah, I just wanted to get that story out there. There's going to be levels each place you go for new and young athletes. The work never stops. Life is going to happen. But you got to put the work in regardless, and adapt to the situation. What may have worked yesterday may not work today, and you got to be willing to kind of change on the fly and be adaptable there. So, this is Chris Miles from Letterman Legends. I appreciate you guys tuning in for another week here with us. Hope you guys enjoy. Be sure to like and follow us on Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music. Please leave us a review And yeah, could continue tuning in, guys. But I hope you have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks again for joining us.